In February 2018, on the banks of the Euphrates in Syria, a force of roughly 500 men crossed a line US command had marked as a limit of advance. They were mercenaries. T-72s up front, armored vehicles behind, infantry keeping pace with the push, according to US intelligence assessments and later Pentagon reports. Most of them were Wagner Group fighters. The Russian paramilitary force Yevgeny Prigozhin had turned from a small unit of hired veterans into an organization tens of thousands strong, operating on 3 continents. On the other side of the line was a US force of about 40 special operators, backed by artillery, attack helicopters, and covering air support. The clash lasted 3 hours. When it was over, the Americans didn't have a single casualty. Estimates of Wagner dead ran anywhere from 200 to 300 men, depending on the source. The gap wasn't an accident. It wasn't luck. It was the direct result of a fundamental philosophical split over what an elite soldier is, how he's built, and what kind of war he's meant to fight. And that split starts long before any battlefield. It starts the moment each system decides who gets in and who stays out. At its peak expansion during the war in Ukraine, the Wagner Group recruited in Russian federal prisons. Prigozhin personally went to penitentiaries across Russia to pitch it. 6 months on the front line and your criminal record vanishes, a new life on the other side. According to analyses by Israel's Institute for National Security Studies and the Sufan Center at points in 2022 and 2023, convicts for murder, rape, and trafficking made up the majority of new Wagner recruits sent to the front at Bakhmut. The training those recruits got lasted, in the worst stretches for manpower, between 2 weeks and a month. Basic infantry stuff, how to run a rifle, how to move in assault formation, how to push forward when the guy in front of you drops. No psychological screening, no assessment of operational autonomy, no process filtering who can function under pressure and who folds. Because in Wagner's Bakhmut doctrine, the ability to function under pressure didn't matter. The tactic Western military analysts called the meat wave, waves of flesh, was conceptually simple and operationally brutal. You throw the first wave at a Ukrainian defensive position, it dies. But before it dies, it shows you where the automatic weapons are, where the sharpshooters are, where the evacuation routes and blind spots in the defenses are. You send the second wave with that intel, it gets a little farther, then dies. The third wave gets farther still. Eventually, the position breaks. Michael Kaufman, an analyst at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace and one of the most respected researchers on the Russian military, documented that pattern precisely. Wagner turned expendable soldiers into reconnaissance ammunition. Every death brought operational information the next wave used. It worked at Bakhmut. For months against Ukrainian defenses under severe ammo constraints, it worked. Now put those same men in front of 40 American operators with precision artillery, real-time air cover, and 8 years of training apiece. It doesn't work. And that's exactly why veterans from Wagner's hardcore, the ones who existed before the prison expansion, who built the group's reputation in Syria and Africa, describe Delta Force training with a mix of contempt and unease that Western analysts translate as professional hatred. The contempt is easier to grasp. Russian paramilitary culture, and Wagner inherits straight from the Soviet Spetsnaz tradition and the Chechnya and Afghanistan veterans who formed its original core, is built on a particular idea of masculine toughness. Extreme physical endurance, tolerance for degraded living conditions, the ability to operate with bad kit on rough ground. That's what elite means in that tradition, the guy who can take more than anyone else. Delta's training produces the opposite of that. Or rather, something that looks like the opposite but is fundamentally different. Eric Haney, one of Delta's founding operators, summed the unit's selection philosophy in a line that nails it. Delta doesn't want men who can endure. It wants men who can think while they endure. the distinction sounds semantic. It isn't. A hardcore Wagner soldier faces extreme deprivation by developing what Russian psychologists who studied the Spetsnaz tradition call functional numbness, the ability to shut down the part of the brain that processes discomfort and keep running on doctrinal autopilot. You do what you're told to do, whatever the physical cost, until you're dead or the mission's over. A Delta operator faces extreme deprivation while keeping the ability to make original decisions. Selection at Camp Dawson in the mountains of West Virginia strips away feedback on purpose. No instructor tells you if you're passing or failing, no sense of how much is left, no external structure your brain can use as an anchor. What that produces in the candidates who survive isn't numbness. It's cognitive autonomy under stress, the ability to keep generating new solutions to new problems when your body's coming apart. Dale Comstock, a Delta veteran with decades in the unit, put what selection is really measuring: mental sharpness, adaptability, and the psychological architecture to function without external validation. Nobody, Comstock said, was ever impressed by big muscles or fancy credentials. To a hardcore Wagner veteran, that picture is deeply alien. And the discomfort it causes is real, because Wagner's logic, the logic that turned convicts into reconnaissance weapons at Bakhmut, assumes the individual soldier is replaceable, that a fighter's value is his ability to advance until he dies, and that his death buys something the next man will use. In that logic, spending months on psychological selection to find the 20 men in 100 who can operate on their own is a grotesque waste when you can just recruit 500 inmates and throw 4 waves at the same objective. And this is where the hatred gets more specific. The Wagner veterans who fought in Syria before the prison expansion were genuinely capable operators. Many had come through the GRU, the FSB, or the regular Russian army. They understood what Delta Force represented operationally, and precisely because of that, the comparison was unbearable. At Deir ez-Zor in February 2018, the American operators who tore apart the Wagner force didn't do it with numbers on their side. They did it with what Delta and Green Beret selection systematically produces: the right calls at impossible speed. Indirect fire coordinated with ground positions without a single friendly fire round. Position adjustments in real time as the Wagner advance shifted vector. Lateral comms between operators who didn't wait for higher-ups to tell them what to do. Each of those skills is the direct product of years of selection, filtering out people who need external direction to decide. Delta doesn't run a rigid decision hierarchy in the field because it was built not to need one. Every operator on the ground has the authority and the chops to do what the situation demands. To a military system built on hierarchy, loyalty to superiors, and executing orders, whether the regular Russian army or Wagner in its mass assault version. That doesn't just look different, it looks wrong, it looks undisciplined. It looks like something a real army wouldn't put up with. And it's exactly that discomfort, the inability to recognize as discipline something that doesn't look like discipline, that Wagner veterans voice when they describe the American Special Operations System. You don't hate what you don't understand only when you're beneath it. You hate it when what you don't understand kills 300 of your men in 3 hours, and the only side that walked away in one piece is the one you can't wrap your head around. The Euphrates fight wasn't a meeting of 2 military systems on equal terms. It was the clearest live fire demonstration you could ask for of what happens when the philosophy that the man is disposable runs into the philosophy that the man is irreplaceable. And that's exactly why every man has to be able to think like the commander, decide like the commander, and act like the commander when the commander isn't there. 40 against 500, 3 hours, 0 American casualties. There isn't enough contempt in the world to erase what that number says. If you want to see how Russia responded to that lesson, and what the Russian military is trying to build so it doesn't get torn apart like that again, that video is on screen now. Subscribe if you want to keep up with the analyses defense institutes publish and the news rarely explains clearly enough.